Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 111. Love and Longing. So do you think that he's going to try something? Miro Noir whispers to Vernon as he continues to spoil her. Most people keep making the same mistake about them both, assuming they're not paying attention to the world around them. But they just have a primary focus. But a primary focus is just that, primary. The first among others. Not going to, has. He's getting in good with the local power structure. Lucky him, he's good and useful, and the Empress likes useful things. Mr. Koga might find himself a little annoyed at times. The nobility on Serbo is mostly tame, just wild enough to make the Empire wealth and glory, but not so much as to cause too much trouble. Those beyond the homeworld are a little more ambitious, forgetting that the Empress's reach is long and her eyesight keen. I fear your new friend will find himself running from world to remind Apuk women that they swore certain oaths, and just because they have not been called upon in the last week does not mean the oath has expired. Maybe he doesn't strike as the type who minds travel, Vernon notes. No. Even though he adores the village as he does, one does not cross the galaxy if they are averse to travel. A fair point, my fairest beloved. Miro Noir purrs. Hey, you're the fair one here, my sweet, delicate princess of beauty and love. No, you're the fair one of beauty and love, my sorcerer. No, you. You. And they are gone, one of the nearby princesses notes before snapping out a fan to giggle behind, an affectation she picked up from watching Galactic Council meetings. Vernon just gives her the "oh, go away" wave, and the laughing only picks up. They knew that would happen. But people being jealous of their happiness is only natural. You two do know you have to stop mooning over each other eventually, right? Never, Miro Noir answers. Well, too bad, Miss Lovey-Dovey. It's your turn again. The princess interrupts again, and Miro Noir sighs in annoyance. Oh, very well. I'll put my next opponent on the ground and get back to my beloved. Drop them hard, beloved, Vernon tells her, even as she rises up. Her opponent is the one with the fan, and she receives a nearly salacious wink from her opposite. Miro Noir raises an eyebrow as she adjusts a bow on her dress. It's in her favorite color of rich red and bright green. For most, having a color similar to their own hair would cause a clash. But on Miro Noir, it instead complemented her beauty. Something Vernon never failed to remind her. Her white-clad opponent is a veil away from being ready for a human wedding. Apparently, the woman is a fan of the Speaker of the Council, which Miro Noir does understand. For one, not a warrior, the fact that the Pavarus can wield that much functional power with a borderline ceremonial position is most impressive, especially after her recent display and proving that even the depths of cruel space were not beyond her reach or influence. Vanathar, are you ready? Miro Noir asks her sister in battle. I am, dear Miro Noir. Hopefully the adoration of that adorable husband of yours doesn't distract you? Distract me? He is my motivation. I fight harder with him here. I'm glad to hear it. Vanathar notes as both of them enter the ring. As they do so, Miro Noir turns to Vernon and wags her finger at him. He tucks away the sign he was about to use to cheer her on. Not a distraction? It's not, but it is somewhat gauche, Miro Noir states. Now then, shall we? Yes, we shall, Vanathar says as she breathes out a tongue of green flame, and then slams her open fan through it to twist it into a massive tornado of blisteringly hot warfire. Miro Noir rushes along with the winds it kicks up and seizes the warfire to funnel it towards Vanathar, while unraveling the tornado of immense heat. The stream is dodged, and Vanathar leads with a punch that sends Miro Noir skidding back to crash through and disperse the now weakened tornado of flame. She regains her footing and charges right back. But as she approaches, and Vanathar takes a ready stance to counter her, Miro Noir suddenly jerks her tail with Axiom to pull herself to the side and change the momentum at the last moment. Her blow, coming from an unexpected direction, slips past most of Vanathar's guard, but like Miro Noir, she absorbs the blow and is merely sent skidding back rather than actually injured. As she flies back, she spits out a wall of warfire that distorts the air and shifts things to provide a visual cover. Whatever she wants to do, she doesn't want Miro Noir to see it coming, which means the best answer is to rush through and not give her any time to set things up. She crashes through the distorting wall, and her eyes widen fractionally. It was a trap, The distortion is assumed to block vision to prepare something sneaky, and in that light it was successful. But the trick is that there is no trick. The blitz has her off balance, as Vanathar is in position to slam into her side. Mironoir turns ever so, and gets her hands in the way of the lashing slipper. The force is immense, comparable to rail shot from a warship, as powerful as an undaunted pop gun. She's sent tumbling and crashing through the grounds. It takes a great deal more force to stop than any previous blow, and her dress is a mess. A touch of axiom into her crown, and she is immaculate once more. Just in time to catch Vanathar's next attack, in dispersing the axiom to the side. The block was perfect, and Vanathar is trapped hanging there for a fraction of a second. More than enough time for Mironoir to grab onto her and start to thrash the woman back and forth. Without a convenient building, boulder or tree to slam her opponent into, she pendulums her fast and hard, causing the ground to jump several times before Vanathar kicks out of the grip, spins fast, and rains a trinity of lightning, fast punches into Mironoir before she starts to block her opponent. She tries to get a good grip on a foe, but Vanathar is being very cautious and isn't giving her a chance to get her into a grip again. Good. Stupid fighters don't deserve the crown of a battle princess and make poor sparring partners. It's the funny thing about the Shellbreaker tournament. Yes, a degree of sheer power is needed to overwhelm your enemies, but you also need to be smart. Very smart. You need it in order to make your armor properly, to pace yourself with each round, and how to identify who's doing what in the chaos around you, while coming up with a counter for all of it. That was what flushed out the girls who were strong enough to get to the Green Warfire without the help of the Empress or some personal tutoring from the battle princesses to bring you up to snuff. Vanathar is starting to get a little frustrated as Mironoir is just focusing on her defense to keep her from causing any more damage or get the upper hand, which is playing perfectly into what Mironoir wants as she deflects, blocks and dodges and parries move after move, and doesn't take the offense. The sheer dissonance is unbalancing Vanathar bit by bit until Vanathar makes a massive flurry that takes her off the ground before she drags herself down with a massive heel strike aimed at the top of Mironoir's head. Mironoir shifts to the side just enough to dodge the attack, and with Vanathar committed to the blow, she's unable to defend herself as she put her whole body into the attack. Something Mironoir does now as her everything goes into a massive stomach punch. The typical battle princess hardiness is indeed there, but that's it. There is no other protection, and against a punch this strong, there needs to be a lot more than just that. Vanathar folds in half around Mironoir's blow in a futile attempt to ignore the massive attack, and she's sent crashing backwards, having her own turn sent tumbling and rolling on the ground. But unlike Mironoir's own acquaintance with the ground, there was no blocking of the attack. The result is a slow-to-rise Vanathar that chokes and gasps as she tries to get her internal organs under control and resists the near-all-consuming urge to vomit. And that is Mironoir's win. Beloved, can you make sure my opponent isn't too badly hurt? She's still my sister in battle, Mironoir asks, and Vernon nods before vanishing to reappear at Vanathar's side. He helps her up, and she staggers to her feet even as Mironoir slowly approaches. The heaving and hard breathing is mostly stilled by the time Mironoir gets there, and she reaches up to activate the crown and clean Vanathar up. You did very well. If you had hit me faster after that good trick in the fight, I would have been done then and there. I figured if I hit hard enough, the speed wouldn't matter. It can be that sometimes, but not always. You gave me just enough time to get my hands in the way. Without that, it'd be me needing to be helped up. Then she would have. Vernon, no, it's a legitimate duel. You cannot avenge me regardless of outcome. But I want to, Vernon protests. I know, beloved, Mironoir says with a smile. Oh, do you two ever stop? Vanathar demands. No, Vernon says plainly, and Vanathar begins laughing helplessly at the absurdity. There we go, feeling better. Wait, how much of that was authentic, and how much was to make me feel better? Vanathar asks. It was all authentic, but it did make you feel better. Oh, sweet goddess, you two are too much. Far from it, some days I feel like I cannot possibly declare my love for my beloved enough, Vernon states. Oh, Vernon. Mironoir gushes and he steps away from Banithar to embrace and begins softly kissing his wife. The defeated battle princess plants her hands on her hips and just watches the two for a moment before huffing in annoyance. Then she quickly glances around before spotting her fan and snapping her gloved fingers. It zips through the air and into her grasp, a touch of axiom, and it's restored. She contemplates it a touch as she tries to ignore the soppy romance within arm's reach, and then huffs as she fails in that regards and steps away to get some peace of mind. She's a well-married woman and first wife of her husband, but just seeing how deeply, intensely into one another Vernon and Mironoir are cannot help but prompt pangs of jealousy unbecoming of a battle princess. What does she have to be jealous about? She's wealthy, respected, powerful, and will be remembered for all time. She has it made. My Mironoir. But damn if the Matchless hasn't shown them all up. Are they always this goofy? I've been on the planet for 18 hours and 24 minutes now. Daiju asks the Empress, who gives him an inquisitive look before huffing. Oh yes, they're a wonderful comedy routine. Comedy? No matter the situation, no matter how serious, formal or informal it is, you can always find them whispering sweet nothings to each other and a single suggestion away from a ballroom dance or finding a closet to get even closer. Pretty funny to me, the Empress notes. I suppose seeing two people in the middle of a romance novel, while everyone else is in the middle of a political thriller or a drama would be pretty hilarious contrast, Daiju remarks before chuckling. I suppose having them as a distraction somewhere would be a pretty funny tool. I may have to borrow them on occasion. Oh, then Vernon will be your apprentice? Honestly, no, but he will be a first-class distraction. With how much he adores his wife and daughters, anyone with sense will now he won't risk them, which means using them is just perfect for me. And if someone connects the dots, my battle princess and her husband can certainly take care of themselves. Only a fool attacks one of my women, and only a fool's fool attacks a sorcerer, the Empress states. Any questions? When did the tradition of ignoring status as a symbol of status begin? I find it quite interesting, but it just goes back so very far. It predates me by so much that it was simply the way of things when I was a little girl, the Empress replies. Ah, the perfect answer, answering the question while giving away no actionable information. Well played. You think I know. I think that if anyone knows the Empress confident enough to walk barefoot through the streets, with no music to herald her coming, with a dress that looks cheap and no announcement, would be the inexpert of the odd relationship Apuk have with humility. Expertise in something does not translate into knowledge of its origin, the Empress reminds him. Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 112, Not Exactly Hidden. Just move slowly. Speed comes with practice. Take your time, get the movements right, and get comfortable moving the right way. Daiju instructs the children. He had a very good mandate from the Empress. Train the next generation, get some skilled ninja, and next month she will have a paying mission. He's glad he didn't have to remind her about the paying part. But what he's really glad for? The opportunity to bring out all those old photos he had digitized and copied for Uthtir and Terefuz, a baroness and battle princess. Boy's done well for himself, especially seeing as he's more or less expected to start working his way through the unattached staff. It's a hell of a situation where the man is expecting to be having some fun time with the maids and cooks. Daiki isn't saying a thing, still a little miffed about the pictures. But what was Daiju supposed to do? Not warn the girls what their oncoming clutches of children were going to look like? The boy had worked well and hard and had both women pregnant. Of course he was going to get close to the mothers. He wanted to be there for his great-grandchildren. Apuk don't really show that much. Then they apparently lay eggs, which then harden in great-grandchildren from eggs. Questioning who got to inherit in the Apuk nobility if the children were hatched in a clutch had brought Daiju down a 2.5-hour rabbit hole of explanations, silly wars, precedents, and in the end, Daiki had called him a fool and told him to ask the forest. He did, And he then remembered the exact times these historical events had happened from the perspectives of the forest in all things that had been connected to it at the time, which had included a small number of sorcerers, one of which was a rumor monger, and as nosy as it gets without being an anthropomorphic nose, otherwise known as a freelance spy or a dickhead. Calling a man a pervert away from Earth is more wish fulfillment for the locals. But if he was on Earth, then that bastard would have been slapped stupid and likely shot for all the times he was caught with his face poking through someone's window. Long story short, if the eggs hatch at the exact same time, which is what Apuk are talking about when they say fraternal twins, usually, but two from one egg, very, very rare, and generally each family used to have their old methods until there was a cultural change in that each of the clutch would be tested by the current holder of a title, and they would decide who inherits. Of course, for many of them, that test usually boils down to who's mommy's favorite. Not to mention, many of the nobility would simply have their children when older, so less eggs would be laid. But that was before the Apuk were part of the larger galaxy, and the new noble methodology of just taking the seat for as long as inhumanly possible kicked off. Some of these ladies had been in their seats of power for so long they may as well be welded in, only leaving when they finally do something stupid enough to get killed, assassinated, or being charged with some kind of crime. And there is a lot of indication that many of these so-called crimes are frame jobs by the more ambitious types. And those ambitious types generally then go and make so many enemies that the hot seat is good and empty again in short order. Widen your stance, little one. You're looking to be stable. He snaps himself out of his semi-reverie to correct one of his students. But I thought my tail might balance me. The little girl protests. Perhaps, but it would have to be long enough to reach the ground. Daiju notes as he steps up to her and gently pushes her on the shoulder. She has to step back. See? Widen your stance, and... He gives her another gentle push, and this time, she doesn't go anywhere. Get it? I guess, but why are we learning to fight with our hands alone? Don't weapons work better for fighting? She asks, and he nods. They do, but you don't always have weapons. Not to mention, Daiju says before pointing past her, and she follows his pointing. He then gives her a gentle chop in the side of the head. People don't think about hands being weapons, meaning you can get some pretty cheeky shots in, and in a serious fight, a cheeky first shot often winds up being the cheeky last shot too. Oh, not to mention the police can't arrest you for not having a weapon, she says, and he snaps his fingers and points at her. You get it, he says with a bright smile, and she beams at him in response. Although I'm sure there's probably some place in T Galaxy so silly that it's illegal to not have a weapon. Really? The galaxy is a really big place. It probably has everything in it. Even a world where there's a man for every woman? She asks. That's my home world. I came from there, Daiju says in amusement. The idea that something so mundane could be so fantastical to other people is amusing. Why do you think something like that is so special? How can you not? Didn't you hear or see just how much Lady Miranwar and Sir Vernon adore each other? They're like... She makes a motion with a deep sigh. And like... She goes through several iterations of they're like and like with a sigh following each like, and Daiju cannot stop the chuckle from bubbling out. I'm afraid, young lady, that such love is rare even where men are plentiful enough to compete for the attention of the women around them, Daiju notes. But they're so... with each other. They are, it's very rare, and a bit much for me. I don't think I can love like that, Daiju says. But isn't that lonely? I've outlived my wife and had a beautiful and capable son with her. My grandson helped found this village and now I'm living still. Why would I be lonely? I have my family and it is growing, he says before standing fully upright again and moving back to his position. Now as I do children. He is very good with children, Banathar notes to Miranwar. After their own training was complete, they and the several other battle princesses had come to the hidden village to oversee the training of the Barlis and Harkul children, only to find them all slowly going through an unarmed combat routine, with Daiju and Daiki leading it all. Most of them are, Noir states before nodding up to several figures on the tops of the taller buildings and overlooking the entire clearing. And the ones without the patience for it keep a respectful distance, but watch over regardless. Times are changing and changing for the better, Vanathar notes before she and Noir both spot Vernon waving and Noir rushes towards him. Vanathar follows at a walk to make sure everything's all right. The answer is yes, it's just that nap time is over and the little girls are restless, which leads to Vanathar being borderline conscripted into helping play with the adorable little girls. Borderline being she was assumed to be part of helping play with them before she could ask. I overheard part of the conversation that he had with the Empress, Vanathar notes out of nowhere. And, Vernon asks, the Empress is setting up a village of assassins, scout spies, and messengers. This village, does she sense trouble? Vanathar asks, and Vernon can finally place the conversation. She plays the long game. She's setting up having these tools for when she may need them rather than needing them and setting them up. Does that make sense? Vernon says. It does, but she has a way of knowing what kind of trouble there will be. And if she's been setting up assassins and focusing on taming sorcerers, what could possibly need sorcerer assassins? A force of them, no less, Vanathar asks. I don't know. I don't sense a civil war, but her reign is a peaceful one. Peaceful because she won long ago. Noir considers. There is little point to worrying about what-ifs, Vernon says, quoting his father. There is only what you know and what you do not. You know that the Empress is potentially preparing for trouble. If there is trouble, then you can prepare. If it never happens, then you are doing fine. If it does, then you are ready. Not sure it totally works like that. Of course not. No platitude or saying can possibly encompass the entirety of life. It's too complicated and too chaotic. You can spend your entire life trying to keep people around you happy so you never have to fight. And then someone in a drunken stupor might mistake you for someone they hate and attack. Vernon explains. There's only so much control we have, which is disquieting. Vanathar says before Noir decides that she wants Vanathar's lacy bow and wants it now. What? Hey, enough of that. Let it go. Let it go now. Oh dear, excuse me. Noir notes as she quickly comes around and bundles Noir into her left hand to help Vanathar remove her bow from Noir's little grip. The entire girl is passed to her mother, and Vanathar uses her freed-up hands to gently and delicately pull her dress out of the grip of the little girl. Still, there hasn't been a major war in generations, Vanathar considers. Are you afraid? Noir asks. Number. But the idea of killing my fellow Apuk might not be with Apuk, and that's if, and only if, there is some threat the Empress sees and the rest of us doesn't. She's very much the type to stack the deck, whether she needs to or not, Vernon says. But if there is, could you please stop trying to worry a civil war into existence? What happens, happens. Noir chides her. I know, I'm sorry. It just... Vanathar begins and is then handed Noir. What? Hard to stay worried with a happy baby in your hands, Noir notes. I know, I have daughters. Then stop worrying yourself. Otherwise, I'll find a way to put your daughters into your arms rather than my own. Let's see you stay angry with your own little girl, Noir threatens. So, have you been thinking of names? Daiju asked Daiki. I have. Are you going to tell me the names? I don't want you to try and take them. Do remember, you're a young man again, grandfather. You going to stay a bachelor? Daiki asks. Oh? What oh? Surely you get how the galaxy sees a sprightly young man in his early 90s. You've only had one wife and child? Are you all right? Are you impotent? Impotent, asked my grandson. Your concerned grandson who is worried you might not have it anymore. Daiki teases and Daiju starts laughing helplessly. I'm serious. It's a bad sign when a man isn't so much as looking for his... Stop. Just stop, Daiju says with laughter. What? I can't be interested in my uncles and aunts. To be, Daiki asks. I'd need to find a lady willing to lay with an old man. Do you have any idea how many of their older sisters, aunts, and even mothers aren't attached? Daiki asks, pointing out to the students who have just finished up with the unarmed training. Daiki brings a hand up to his mouth to call out to them, and Daiju grabs his wrist and pulls his hand down while smiling. Is something wrong? Let's not get me as the main bit of man-ass being fought over by two inbred and violent families. But they're separated now, and I'm sure you can handle yourself, Daiki teases. Would you really do such a thing to your grandfather? Well, you get along so well with the children. I'm sure you officially being a parent to them, too, would be. Okay, no, just stop, Daiju tells him. That's more than enough. Oh, it's enough when you're under the firing line. But when you're the one firing, it's all right? Hey now, let me throw my stones from this comfortable glass house here, Daiju remarks with his tongue out a bit. Daiki then proves he has chopsticks hidden on him, and he tries to grab his grandfather's tongue with them. He fails, but the quick fight over the chopsticks leaves both men chuckling. Grandson, are there those in this village, adults mind you, that would make good shinobi? There are numerous undaunted, all of them if it's important, and a few Alpuk sorcerers. The Chars, for example, including the son. Char would be the less vicious of the two, but his ability to breathe underwater is not to be underestimated. He successfully infiltrated the Bright Forest into an underwater bunker that had a veritable swarm of drones and cameras to contend with. He gave us a direct in, and without that, what we did there would be much harder. I love how you struggle so hard to explain without running afoul of the non-disclosure. Legalities suck. Only if you don't know how to play with them, Daiju notes. True. So we need ninja? Proper ninja? We do. I'll be testing you tomorrow. And if you're up to it, you'll help me train the others. Whether something is happening or not, the Empress has use of us, which means we can cement our position here all the further. I don't think we're in the warring states period, grandfather, but it could become one. Don't jinx it. Why is everyone jinxing things today? Because it's funny? Into a Wider Galaxy, 113. Not exactly hidden. Koga falls upon Koga as Ninja tests Ninja. The test is not one of simple combat, for if it was then Koga, the younger with the brutal training regiments he has undergone, and greater experience with axiom battle techniques, would win. No, this is a test of moving without thought, of acting, of ensuring that the proper movements are no longer planned actions, but reflexive ones, that the knowledge and skill has been engraved deeper than the bones, that they have been carved into the very soul. And so both men are blindfolded. Their ears are plugged and only touch, instinct and raw senses beyond the norm guide their blows. Both men have requested that the dark forest only stop them from harming each other during this test. Koga the elder grabs his grandson by the shirt and flips him over his body in the intent to slam him into the ground. But the younger's instincts are good, and he catches himself before shifting his weight to bowl over his elder and turn a contest of swift blows to a grappling contest. A foot touches down as gently as a falling feather, rolls and moves with such precision that the boards do not shift or squeak despite them being deliberately loosened. The owner of these feet has their senses on full blast as they avoid the gaze of a camera, step between the beams of lasers, and the whole time makes less noise than his own shadow. As they open the door to their destination, another is waiting for them and nods in approval. A single dart hits the large creature, and it starts to run in protest, looking for the source of its torment. Its squeals and frantic movements growing more and more erratic until it collapses and twitches out the rest of its life. One man stops the clock and shows the timing. 32 seconds. Koga the younger taps his blowgun against his palm and nods. Need to refine the batch a little more, Daiki remarks. It's good enough, Daiju says. Good enough is never good enough. Daiki replies and Daiju smiles. Keep coming, Grampy. Ignore the burn, Daiki says as he races at a borderline sprint ahead of his grandfather. Both men are balancing heavy weights across their shoulders, and Daiki has at least twice the weight Daiju has. Yes, I know you have this one down, but for the sake of completeness, it must be tested, Daiju remarks as he's not doing as well as his grandson in this endurance test. And he can't even blame age anymore. Physically, they're closer to fraternal twins than grandparent and grandchild now. You know I can take your weight off you if you're not. I have it, Daiju says. Are you sure? Daiki is either taking the piss or genuinely concerned, and Daiju is both annoyed and proud he cannot tell which. Completely, Daiju replies. The point of the unrelenting march is distance and time. They're crossing the entire forest twice before returning to the village, which is damn near dead center to it all. They haven't even hit the first full crossing yet. On a thin thread, a man in dark blues descends and then fortifies his grip with his toes to free his hands as he slowly flips upside down. He descends a little further and begins to shuffle through data slates and paperwork. Then he hears footsteps, and in a flurry returns everything to where it was, flips back upright, and then climbs the thread. The guard enters the room and nods. Everything is back to where it should be, and there's no reason to set off the alarm. He closes the door and then walks down to the next room and observes the other man navigating a series of passwords and communication firewalls. He gets through the system and the guard starts applauding. His grandson turns and offers a slight bow. Why are you bringing me into this? Imagar asks as he's suddenly face to face with himself. There is no axiom being used, and he knows it's one of the two Koga messing or testing with things. You're the most different that's still human, so you're a good first test for disguises. Fair enough, the dark-skinned man notes before making a point of outright ignoring what they're doing. There is movement, and Imagar immediately moves to throw Koga under the bus. There's the fake. Both he and Koga say in the exact same voice, at the exact same time, and Imagar looks up to find Tat as he's pointing at the disguised Koga. The damn ninja is pointing right at him. They then both speak as one again. Are we really doing the mirror routine? A small brown fox ran. Peter Piper picked a pepper. She sells seashells. Oh, go away. They say to each other in perfect sync, and Koga the Elder claps before the fake Imagar removes the rubber mask and contact lenses. Need to practice with an apuk next, Daiki says. Just show me proper horns and a tail prosthetic. They're near enough to human to count, Daiju notes. Y'all need to do that ninja nonsense away from me. Why? I'm testing you next, Daiju states and finds he's suddenly looking down the barrel of a quickly drawn pistol. That reminds me, I need to check marksmanship too. I'm guessing blowgun use doesn't count? Number bow and bullet, Daiju remarks. Ka-ka, Kalstarn calls out as Daiki tries to take aim. The man gives the child a reproachful look before taking aim again. Ka-ka, Muxmoro adds, and Daiki just ignores him. Ha-ha, he, tookie. Jeth Erla tries before all three kids erupt into ka-kas to try and distract the man who still hits 5 bullseyes in 5 shots. Do I have to restrict movie time with you three? Daiki demands after the quick bout of firing sees him blaze through the course. Oh, come on, you did all right anyways, Muxmoro calls out. I did all right in spite of you three, not because, Daiki remarks. The 6th target hit the ground, Daiju notes. I only had 5 shots. No excuse, Daiju remarks before Daiki grabs him, and he's thrown hard and lands on the target, flipping in the air to land on his feet. I will accept this as a hit. Good, next test? Daiki calls over. One final test. The final test is to teach, to pass it all onto someone else. So for no other reason than maximum pettiness, Imagar is who Daiki literally drags into the ninja training. As he does so, Daiju grabs Dale and makes a few snaps about redneck ninjas. He then takes a solid punch in the ribs, and they're off to practice. Come on, big man, we're racing my grandpa on who can churn out another ninja first. He's got the redneck, but with your natural camouflage, we should have this. You did not just got there, Imagar says, starting to chase after Koga, who grabs a large pack of supplies. Get your shit, we got training, Koga calls back to him, and Imagar snorts like a bull before grabbing the second large pack and chasing Koga into the dark forest. You better run. I'm going to tie you in a knot and use you as a counterweight, Imagar threatens, sounding scary but far from serious. Koga will have to try a lot harder to actually insult him. First, you need to catch me in an endurance race. Fine by me. Hello, grandfather. Both Kogas grade each other to the massive confusion of their students. They then completely fail to answer any question as to who is who for the rest of the run. It's a waste of good paratalk, Dale protests to Koga as he's told where to test his new poison. Too bad, fire away, Koga says. But it's not the Koga with Dale, it's the Koga with Imagar who has little reason to refuse the shot. Hey, that was my student's target, Koga protests. Snooze you lose, grandfather, Koga replies. So I do have the grandfather, Dale asks. Enough questions. We go to find another test subject for your mixture. They're taking the piss, Dale notes as he and Imagar descend upon their targets on thin ropes. No shit, Imagar notes before suddenly Koga is in there and pulls on Imagar, causing him to swing back down and into Dale. Before they can smack back and forth, like a Newton's cradle, they catch themselves and go back to things, before rushing back up before the guard can find them. They then start going through the rest of the test. Well, someone's taking this seriously and someone else is not, but I'm not certain who. Vernon notes to Miro Noir as four Kogas try to suss out which is which without giving away which one they are. Oh dear. Well, if nothing else, it's a good show of disguises, Miro Noir adds as they watch the display below. They're sitting comfortably on the roof of Vernon's personal tower and looking over things. Vernon then looks down. Fussing? A little. I'll be back, Vernon says before vanishing in a woodwalk. 5 seconds later, a squirmy little Apuk girl is in his arms and reaching for Miro Noir. She likes mommy more. Oh dear, they're already playing favorites, Miro Noir says, taking her baby girl away from Vernon and is instantly cuddled into by the little girl, all but burying her face in her breasts. And thank goodness our horns are rounded until puberty. Thank goodness, Vernon agrees before reaching over to help a bit. Doesn't stop them from getting caught on things, though. No, it doesn't, Miro Noir notes before smirking. Put it back. Your hand. Put it back, she says, and he smirks before shifting where he's sitting so he can hold his Miro Noir closely, intimately, and not have their fussy little girl notice. On the ground, all four Kogas sigh at the sight, then speak as one. There's a very good reason he's not undergoing this training. And stop using Axiom to cheat you three. Stick with mundane techniques that can't be sensed, sight unseen, Daiju orders. Bullets and arrows pierce targets. Trading off as the two people testing their marksmanship literally trade the weapons one after the other, over and over again as the targets fly. One Koga gives the other a pointed look, and he nods with a bit of a sigh. There's so much and yet so little to turn a samurai into a shinobi. Some of the best shinobi were samurai once. Still, they are done. They can move silently. They are swift with bow and blade and fist. They are enduring, they are clever, and they know how not to be seen and how not to be noticed. They are ready, Daiju says. Good, because that big ship is nearly here. The inevitable. We will have to start training the others, with Imagar and Dale helping as well. Hopefully in a few short months, we will have the whole village trained. Well, if our numbers double each time, it shouldn't take too long. At the latest, by year's end, we'll be more than capable of fielding missions across the entire planet simultaneously. More than that, by having a central fort we can retreat to at will, all it would take is an ally with the ear and voice of the Empress here to move flawlessly, which is downright trivial as so many battle princesses find visiting this place to be one of their favorite things to do, Daiju says, and Daiki nods. Daiju then smirks. We have our Jonin to train other Genin and move on proper missions with skill. We are ready. But for what is the question? That is uncertain, but what the Empress may have forgotten is that our forest is in contact with another. Even if something were to happen here, the Bright Forest is another angle of approach, to say nothing of Morgarken's goal of spreading further living forests to other worlds. She's not the type to forget details such as that. But the Bright Forest does allow a different kind of approach. Fungal spores are not to be underestimated, Daiki says, nor are leaves on the wind. And there it is, Harold notes as the world is zoomed in on. Big, beautiful oceans full of beasts that can take a literal bite out of this ship, with a forest that can and will reach up and slap the stupid out of you if you try to use an orbital bombardment on it, to say nothing of what the pretty and pink princesses will do to you. Afraid? Uma teases him. Number, I'm just stating a few facts. After all, A battle princess as a sparring partner sounds like fun, doesn't it? They're all married, though. That one that's in the really strong relationship with the human? Miro something, Giria asks. Miro Noir, Harold answers. Right here, she holds the record for the longest time a battle princess went unmarried, so they're not exactly going to be brought in as family, Giria notes. Of course, and they're still making our own. A bit of training and the girls you brought in. It would be inappropriate to start courting Baryania, Surichar, and or Larlhren, Harold notes. Inappropriate, yes. The plot of some of the most popular pornos in the galaxy? Also, yes. Uma teases him. He sighs. Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 114. Love and Longing. Oh, that's easy enough. I'm basically on loan anyways, Vernon notes. Excellent. But I was more speaking to my battle princess, who you do not need to protect from me, her empress and commanding officer, the empress says in an amused tone. Miro Noir had ducked out due to Ari Noir deciding to lead a couple of her sisters around, and she was quickly herding them all back into the playpen. Vernon opens his mouth to speak, but she cuts him off. Not that I mind too much. It's adorable how much you both protect each other and how quick you are to support one another. If I send my princess to do anything, I know she has the bloody prophet by her side to assist. Not sure I'm in love with the nickname. It's fearsome, certainly, but I didn't kill anyone. The blood was my own, transformed, which makes it all the more perfect. It's as grandiose or as understated as you need, the Empress states. Not to mention, most people tend to think twice when confronted with a river of blood. I'm aware it's why I used it, Vernon notes. Darkness, stinging insects, beasts, and rashes would take the starch out of any sensible opponent. But feuding families are far from sensible, the Empress notes. True, very true, Vernon states even as Miro Noir rushes back. How are they? Quite well, just energetic, she says. Why didn't you go to them, Vernon? The Empress asks. It was my turn. He has been caring for them for the whole past hour with my practicing my forging, Miro Noir states. And I trust my beloved. I know there isn't a thing he would even dream to keep from me. Of course, I would like to know your opinion, though. The inevitable is nearing orbit, and I think you and Vernon would be best as the greeter of their observer, the Empress says with a smirk. I find it most amusing that Earth finds the rest of the galaxy so unbelievable. No species navigates first contact without some kind of adjustment period. Ours is stretched out because every actual bit of contact requires a full third of a year to make that contact. If there was easy contact with Earth, or even just a relay where we could send messages without months between responses, we'd have most of this hammered out by now, Vernon states. You think that your kind is so accepting? I think that the majority would have figured things out, or would be willing to listen by now if the delay was down to a couple weeks instead of multiple months, Vernon asserts. Perhaps. Regardless, I want you two on the landing pad when Observer Wu steps onto Serbo, the Empress orders. Will we be bringing the family or handing them off to being babysat? Miro Noir asks. I will trust your good judgment on that, the Empress says. Then they will be with family if he wishes to see Apuk children with a human father, he will ask, Miro Noir states. Very good. The Inevitable has just gained landing permission for its crafts. Their primary observer is going to be setting down in Nodok. The Empress says after glancing to the side and reading something off. It was the first time that there was a major movement of human sorcerers. And considering the following auction and exposure, Vernon muses, then raises an eyebrow as the Empress turns the camera ever so slightly to show the art piece that he had helped make. And the funds raised from the gift I got, she says smugly. And the other artifacts and relics, Miro Noir says before considering. Is something wrong? Vernon asks. Oh, no. I was just curious about how many of those things were bought back by their original donators. The auction was mostly a show of wealth and nobles playing their games, Miro Noir notes. More than half, although I don't have which ones memorized, the Empress notes. It's a good game for them. It allows them to reinvest into the infrastructure while looking good as they are all addicted to doing. forgetting that the truest form of generosity is like the truest forms of power, that they need not be announced or exposed for, they simply are and are undeniable. How is it that the Apuk haven't produced a primal yet? You've ruled the species with a gentle iron grip for millennia and led it to ever greater prosperity. We know it's possible. So why haven't you done so? The Empress laughs before shrugging. I know not. From what I understand, a primal is a situation of the right person at the right place at the right time. If I am the right person, then maybe I've been in the wrong place or my timing is off. Or maybe good government and combat skills aren't the end of it. Maybe there's more. What would a primal Apuk bring? Perhaps larger horns, hotter fire, a longer tail? Miro Noir questions and Vernon pulls her close. Well, one thing I cannot imagine is greater beauty. There are limits. He purrs at her, and she melts in his arms. Oh, Vernon. Not now, you two. The Empress chides them in amusement. Still, arrange your babysitters and get out there to say hello to the most judgmental of humans. And a clone. A clone? Oh, right, Harold. Yes, I've been kept appraised of undaunted gossip. He's going to be an interesting one. Apparently he had a fight with the Lady of War, the Empress states before sighing. Which, while impressive, is also frustrating, as according to primal canon, there are multiple Nagasha war goddesses and all bear the title Lady of War. Although I hear that Emmanuel may be the first Lord of War. Oh, I bet he'll love that. Although, why is it frustrating if Harold duelled Thessalia? Because there are at least 3 more official war goddesses, and if they show up while Harold is on planet, then they'll want to see just how good he really is. This might lead to some of the nobility getting excited. So the question is, do you want them gone quickly, or do you want potential issues contained? Yes to both, but the easiest way is to simply be expedient and upfront, the Empress notes before huffing in contentment. So many would focus on trying to do things underhanded. It always struck me as silly. This observer is a man trusted by an entire planet to not be compromised by an entire galaxy's worth of wealth, favors, and more, which means he can be relied upon. I will have a message for this observer informing him of my request to his behavior while on Serbo. I do not think he will find them onerous or even mildly unusual. Of course. Anything else? Miro Noir asks. None, my princess. Now go forth and greet our new friend. Friend? Not ally? He represents the human homeworld, not the undaunted. Fair enough, Vernon states. Is that all? For now, get going. Good sorcerer, my princess. The Empress commands and the link terminates. Kind of presumptive to give me orders, Vernon notes. Vernon? Don't worry, I'm not saying I won't do it, but I'm not just going to obey mindlessly. And I do? No, but you are directly under her command. It's just kind of funny, Tot, she's treating it like I am. And if I alone was ordered to go, would you accompany me? Of course. So she may as well have command over us both, Miro Noir concludes. Maybe, but I'll play devil's advocate. A good idea gets through questions unscathed, bad ones crumble. She has a long history of good ideas, you know. Yes, but no one is perfect, and I will always use my best judgment to keep you safe and strong, he promises. Oh, Vernon, how is even questioning the Empress romantic if it's you? Because it's for you, my love. Oh, Vernon. The shuttle put down and he was already at the entrance as the ramp descended. The shuttle pad was a new addition to the community. Nodok, it was called. The nearest building is a stately-looking manor house with a well-maintained lawn and 2 particularly dark trees near the front. The rest of the town is easily visible past it, and a hover car is nearby. Within is Vernon and Miro Noir, simply watching respectfully with another Apuk woman in the driver's seat. Observer Wu raises an eyebrow and walks up, Harold behind him as a bodyguard for now as he approaches the vehicle. I expected a touch more formality, he notes. You requested things to go without ceremony when available, and the Empress respects that. So myself and Vernon will be your primary guides, Miro Noir states. With us is Lala Harkul. Her family has been charged with the protection of the local area. Wait, Harkul? As in the fight between the Barlas and Harkul? Harold asks. Why did you say their name first? Lala Harkul demands. Alphabetical order, Harold answers. What? If you spell it phonetically in English, the letter that Barlas starts with arrives before the first letter of Harkul if it's in a proper alphabetical sequence. Oh, Lala Harkul notes. Observer Wu looks back and forth with a frown on his face. She's terrified of you, he notes as his eyes track. What did you do that has an alien and honest terror at your presence, Mr. Shea? The Barlas and the Harkul families were feuding. Blood was spilling, children were suffering, and the collateral was spilling outwards. The dark forest and its sorcerers got into the middle of it, and we took the children out of the equation to spare them the conflict. The families blamed each other and marched out to murder. I stopped them. Vernon answers. Oh, right, you're the bloody prophet now, aren't you? Harold asks. The bloody prophet, Observer Wu asks. Vernon starts to answer, but Observer Wu holds up a hand. I would like to hear it from your victim, Observer Wu says, and then looks towards Lala Harkul. Ma'am, what did this man do to you? She pauses and looks towards Vernon. He leaves the vehicle and takes several steps away, followed by Mironoir. I will wait out of earshot. Wave to me when you are done. You don't want to hear it. I don't want to cast doubt on anything. I know what I did was right and that there were few better ways to do it. I don't need to interrupt anyone or shout or anything to make my case, so long as you are willing to listen fairly. I am. Now distance, please. Oh, this ought to be good. Harold notes as Vernon and Mironoir walk a good 30 meters away, and Vernon calls up a bush that forms into a comfortable chair he then shares with her. He then turns to Lala Harkul. Are you all right? What's going on? We're asking if you're all right. You've buried it pretty well, but it's clear you're really scared of Vernon. Was it really that bad? Harold asks. He nearly drowned us in blood. It was pitch black in the middle of the day. Stinging flies, horrible beasts, and horrible poison frogs. It was a nightmare, Lala Harkul exclaims, and Observer Wu shares a look with Harold. Let us begin again, ma'am. I am Observer Wu from Earth. I am charged by the governments of Earth to get the clearest look at the galaxy possible and report back. You are one of the few people I have met that appears to have a negative view on humanity, or perhaps just a human. Either way, this makes your testimony a truly valuable one. If Vernon has hurt you or done something terrible to you, then I need to know. I am willing to help you, to offer what assistance I can in compensating you or protecting you from. There is no compensation or protection from a sorcerer. You don't just, Lala Harkul begins before sighing. There's no easy to explain this. Not to a Nanapuk, you don't get it. What don't I get? It seems to me that a human has hurt you and you're still scared of him. This seems fairly straightforward. It's not. Lala says before powering down the air car and having it land gently in the middle of the road. She then leans partway out the window as if exhausted. What happened is very complicated, goes back longer than I think your home nation may have existed, and it involves some of the oldest and most certain truths of the epoch. In light of could have happened, I got off easy in that I'm just scared of him. Compared to the Dreadmoss, the Bloodbark, or the Bone Chewer, I would died horribly if it was them that I upset. Even the judge killed more, and he's a little boy. Observer Wu says nothing as he lets her gather her breath and think. As scary as he is, the Bloody Prophet is one of the two most gentle sorcerers known, the other being the Leviathan Lord, who is the son of one of the most bloodthirsty. What did he do? Observer Wu asked gently. Why do you call him the Bloody Prophet? Because he used his power as a sorcerer to bring down the wrath of God. Your God, she says, pointing to Observer Wu. He called down what he called the plagues of Egypt. It was death, fire, and ice. Darkness? Observer Wu asks, and she nods. Wu's features start to tighten. Stinging flies, frogs, beasts, sickness, more insects, and an entire ocean of blood, she says. How many did he kill, and why? Observer Wu demands. What? How many did he kill, and why? Wu asks in a tight, furious tone. He was stopping us from killing. No one died, but only because his plagues forced us to stop fighting. I beg your pardon? Observer Wu asks. Whatever he had been expecting, that had not been it. He killed no one. He was stopping us from fighting the hated Barlas. Lala Harkle explains with a snarl in her voice. I see. This is much more complicated than I thought. Observer Wu says, leaning back and looking over the air car to where Vernon is sitting with his pretty bride, seemingly content with the world. Not the appearance or behavior of a guilty man, which could be a good thing or a bad thing, to be honest. Who are the Barleys? Stupid, evil, stubborn bitches that got off way too easily, Lala Harkul hisses. Yeah, there's a lot of history there. I see, he says as he looks back up to Vernon, who sees him looking and shrugs. Ma'am, I'm going to give you a contact number for my ship. When you find the time, I want you to explain everything about the Barlas and about the Bloody Prophet. Go into all the detail you care to, and by all means bring in others of your friends or family to make sure you have everything. If I can help you, I will. Really? Lala Harkle asked before looking around. Will that, we got a sort of lucky break at the end. Will your help take that away? I'll make sure it doesn't. After all, the first thing we're doing is just talking. There's no harm in that, right? Depends who's listening, Lala Harkul says, and Observer Wu resists the urge to shout over to Vernon. What the hell is going on? Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 115, Love and Longing. All right, now it is your fair turn to explain yourself, Observer Wu says after Lala Harkul has dropped them off near the mayor's office, and Observer Wu has requested the use of a side room. In summary, I used non-lethal means to prevent two feuding families from mass slaughtering each other. The end result is that both sides are rather intimidated by me. However, we have successfully separated the groups and have legal agreements from both of them that can be summarized as mutual restraining orders to give each other their space. Both are on opposite sides of the dark forest, which is about as far as we can get them from one another without taking one or both sides to different planets. She had quite a few unkind things to say about the Barlas family, Harold notes. It's a stupid feud. It started over both of them being nobles that backed opposite candidates for a provincial rulership. They did this by killing the opposite of their candidate, and then both realized more or less simultaneously that they had their own candidate murdered by the other side, and fingers started pointing. Then it escalated until both families ruined themselves and lost everything but their hatred for each other. Is this on record? Observer Wu asks. Yes. Furthermore, my beloved, and some help from the Empress, ensured that both families are getting a carrot to go with their stick. They are both conditionally reinstated as minor nobility. But to keep it, they have to stop the feud and keep a reasonable distance from each other. They do have a nice house, as do the Barleys. If you're looking for them, then they're located in the Goran barony, which is, as I said, on the opposite side of the dark forest. It's going to be more the same from them, foisting the blame of everything onto the other side, and terror of me. Honestly, I didn't do anything to any of them that lasted out the week, not counting intimidation. Yes, they pointed out many times that they found it odd you hadn't slaughtered people, and that you were being merciful. Sorcerers have a reputation, Mr. Observer, Miro Noir states. They are incredibly dangerous and almost always reveal themselves with a large body count and enormous collateral damage. Until my Vernon showed he has sorceress skills without killing anyone in the Shellbreaker tournament, the smallest amount of damage and death by a sorcerer revealing himself had been Morgarquin the City Shaker, a man who tore down several high-rise office buildings and slowly murdered the main target of his wrath by burying her alive. He was taken down directly by the Empress as he laughed over the stone grave of his enemy. So the Empress is quick to respond? Yes, especially when your actions can be seen from the Imperial Palace without any assistance from Axiom or technology, Mironoir notes. I see. And how did you stumble across this scenario? When did the business of two feuding families become your business? Observer Wu asks. Why does it matter? Mironoir asks. I am here to observe not only the galaxy, but the undaunted as well. Vernon is still undaunted, so I must understand. Are you making a point of poking your nose into the old business and rivalries of others? If you're trying to prevent casualties, then how often are you doing this? Are you self-appointed ender of feuds? A legal one? Or has something else happened? Observer Wu asks. Simply put, the Dark Forest is a massive communal entity. Everything that lives within its borders is a part of it. The only possible exception are people. But people can join with it willingly, at which point the forest becomes an extension of them. That is what a sorcerer is. Is this understandable? Concerning and curious, but yes, it is understandable. Some children from the feuding families were being brought to the Dark Forest by their elder siblings to create links. At that point, they became the business of the sorcerers, especially as the Empress has been gently pushing to organize sorcerers into something that can be better dealt with, understood, and bargained with. Is she being successful? For the most part. The Empress plays her games long and openly. She brings about change, but it always comes with a spoonful of sugar, to use a turn of phrase. Elaborate. Ensuring that the children could be brought out of the useless feud of the Harcool and Barleys, we needed a legal way to shelter the children and keep them safe. The Empress's solution was to recognize the Dark Forest as a legal citizen of Serbo and the territory upon which it stands as not only its home, but its legal property. This is a gift that is also serving her by giving her a degree of legal power over the forest. It's not a power that can bend the forest to her will, but it's something the forest recognizes as useful and something it can lose, giving her a small degree of power over it in a way that it wants her to have it. That's how the Empress moves. She takes control in ways you want her to have it. It's downright insidious. A consummate politician? It gets better, Vernon states. How? The Dark Forest has created the Bright Forest on Lilb to Lelb with the help of its sorcerers. This bit of legislation was legally written in such a way to consider the Bright Forest a citizen of the Empire, as well due to being the child of the Dark Forest, meaning she has legally control over entities that are best described in the same manner that many would describe gods, drove a wedge into a bloody feud, brought the current and next generation of sorcerers into her debt, kept her hands clean, and now the Dark Forest, one of the most ancient and powerful entities on this planet, owes her a solid. With one piece of legislature, one move, many results. That's good, Harold says. Heh, she's very much one of the bigger movers for all that she's focused on. The APOC, the big girls in the galaxy, consider things over centuries if not millennia and cook things slow and thorough. So she moves much more gently and carefully than any politician on Earth. Observer Wu notes. Something to consider and good information to bring back. Indeed. Now why did you want to come to Nodok first? This is where the village that is inhabited by undaunted sorcerers first revealed themselves, repelling an attack by groups under the control of other nobles in their petty games. You shed blood here, killed people here, fought to defend this place. If you're looking for the evidence, it's either literally buried or incorporated into the landscape. Again, literally, Vernon states. He's in the town hall for the documentation, dear. Mironoir chides Vernon, who lets out a small sound of comprehension. Oh, silly me, of course. So that's what this is about? A voice asked in the hallway before gasping. Not as sneaky as you think you are, Harold calls out to her. How long has she been there? Observer Wu asks, and the three other people in the room start speaking at once, and after a few moments of gesturing, they bow to Mironoir. She was there for the last 15 seconds, not long. She showed up muttering about what was taking the hunks so long, Vernon adds. She's a secretary, new hire too if the look of her desk is anything, Harold says with a shrug. Observer Wu slowly looks towards him. I heard and saw her on the phone at a desk that had a lot of little papers everywhere. So she's either scatterbrained and needs a lot of reminders, or is new to the job and isn't in the groove yet, or she's a spy and taking notes, Vernon says with a grin, and Harold smirks. Yes, but if we start going down possible rabbit holes, we might never be able to find our way back out again. There's just so many potential paths for nonsense. Harold says even as part of his mind does go right down the rabbit hole, and he's already hearing it start to hit terminal velocity as the potential for her being a collection of communal robots controlled by an outside power that has been bugged by further parties flashes through, and he just mentally stomps on the silliness. Keep it simple, stupid. Things are only absurd when they're absurd. And if you treat normal things like they're absurd, then you're the absurd one. After the conversation, they head back out, and Observer Wu politely requests a copy of the documentation around the night of the attack on No Dog, and gets it all sent to his communicator in less than a minute. So what do you think? What happened to the armored division? Observer Wu asks. There's some talk about salvaging the metal, but people are understandably uncomfortable digging up what are effectively tombs. Not all of them surrendered, and those that didn't were left down there. Just spell it out. We split the ground beneath them, and they fell in. We then closed it up. Only those that surrendered were let out. And they are? Under the street, Vernon says, pointing out and downwards. Still, a good chunk of them. The emptied ones are already salvaged and such. We made a point of rebuilding and a large auction to fund the rebuilding. And a video recording of you guiding a small child to murder, Observer Wu states. His tone is neutral, but there is a question there. He was going to kill them, no matter what. That's the way sorcerers are, Vernon states. Explain. When someone opens themselves to the dark forest, it joins with them. They keep their own free will in mind, but their memories are shared with the wood. Not all of them, and they're not always clear, but they are there. The forest is inhuman, and I mean that in every description of the word. IT does not think like any species of the galaxy, and most certainly not like a human. And this means what? It means it has a long and deep memory. If something has hurt the forest, it does not forget and cannot forgive, or even stop feeling the pain until the problem is dealt with. This is what makes sorcerers so frightening to the Apuk. It normally takes years, sometimes a decade, for a sorcerer to grow in power and leave the dark forest. By the time that happens, the person that hurt them has usually moved on, even forgotten about them. Then the sky falls on them, and a lethal nightmare is screaming for their head. So what you're saying is that you are now categorically unable to let insult or injury sit. That if someone hurts you or your family, you're going to chase them down with a knife? Number. What I'm saying is that the small child who ran screaming into the dark forest, running until he reduced the soles of his feet into ground meat, that boy was going to come back later and try to find out who was responsible, and he would have eventually. The attack was a false flag operation, but not an infallible one. He would have done horrible, awful things and gotten his revenge in blood. And if he found out later that there were more people responsible, he would have rampaged again and again, and as many times as it took to make sure he had all of them. And there is precedent to this. So you are claiming to minimize damage by helping a prepubescent child murder multiple women? Yes, Vernon says, and Observer Wu's face is a study in blankness. Let go of your presumptions, denials, and beliefs. The galaxy does not play by the rules of Earth, spoken or otherwise. Mr. Observer, Miro Noir begins. She makes sure he has his full attention. It is considered nearly impossible to run from a sorcerer, and there are stories of women abandoning not only their names and lives, but the homeworld to try and fail to escape their wrath. Killing one is considered even more difficult. They have been tricked in the past, though. However, each time it's gotten harder as later sorcerers learn of the trickery and learn from it, and there is no one group or another that produces them beyond men. A man of any age, although often children, any man who walks into the dark forest or finds one of its innumerable hidden extensions can vanish and then return as a nearly unstoppable nightmare. I understand that this may sound horrifying to you, but it's not. The threat of sorcerers was one of the main driving forces that kept our more warlike tendencies in check. The dignity and decency in which the Apuk comport ourselves was threatened into place by sorcerers. If not for them, I shudder to think what we would have done to each other. The danger of a sorcerer has always kept us in line. So if one ignores the fact that it was done by human sorcerers, the actions that the Undaunted took that night, and the following actions of kidnapping and public execution were what considered what by local standards? Incredible acts of restraint and compassion. When a sorcerer rampages, communities are shattered. If it had been Cal's Tarn alone that accomplished all that, and he was a typical sorcerer, and assuming he saw through all deception and only attacked the people that were killed on his behest, then he would have killed them only long after his home was destroyed and family murdered. Instead of extracting his targets as the undaunted sorcerers did, and then executing them, he would have shattered whatever building they were in, ripped them out of the rubble and killed them. And if any escaped, it would have been like a bomb, just waiting to go off. Are sorcerers really that dangerous? Yes and no. They have the patience and wisdom of the forest, but they have such a long memory for injury that there are two faces to the sorcerer. One is the unstoppable vengeance. If it takes 1 year, 1,000 years or longer, they will never forget what you did to them and will never forgive. If you sin against another, a sorcerer may very well do you in for it. But on the other side of the coin, if they're not your enemy, then they are. Amazing. You must understand, for all that they reveal themselves in a screaming nightmare, they then live as the best of us. In their presence, the game grows fat and strong, the larders fill to bursting with meat. You are also safe, for only a fool attacks them, and they are so patient, giving, and gentle to those who have done them no wrong. And that's not even touching on the undeniable truth that they are changing for the better, thanks to humanity no less. So you're saying that having a small child stab a woman to death, having another fed molten metal, and burying 2 alive all at his command was the good ending? Observer Wu demands. Yes. Oh my. We are different, Mr. Observer, and it's more than just the horns and tail. It's the history of my people and how it has shaped us. The most unreasonable thing to expect is for another species to use the same reasoning as you, Miro Noir says gently. It was a lesson I had to learn when I was younger and wandering from world to world, half scouting for potential threats for the Empress, half searching desperately for the perfect husband. I see. Yes, you can see that I found it, Miro Noir says, leaning into Vernon, who gives her a kiss, one that is returned, and they're making out in short order. Observer Wu says nothing, but his eyebrows have climbed up. Harold leans over. I'm told that this show is not only dominating the airwaves, but reruns constantly. Could you have mangled that metaphor harder? Observer Wu asks. Not without physical violence.